This series is sponsored by the Old School Football Shop.
Old School Football is a UK-based retro football company honouring the rich history of football past by creating high-quality embroidered vintage team crests on t-shirts, polos, hoodies and scarves. Minimalist badges from the 1800s right up to the 1990s.
On the website oldschoolfootball.co.uk, you can find English League and non-league, Scottish football, international teams and even rugby. And what's more, until the end of the lockdown podcast, listeners can get 10% off their whole catalogue plus free UK delivery. Just use the code HONEST10 at checkout for 10% off.
You can follow them on Twitter at OSF Shop, Instagram at Old School Football Shop, TikTok at Old School Football, Facebook at Old School Football Shop, and don't forget, just use HONEST10 at the checkout for 10% off.
Hello and welcome to Coaching Diaries, a new series from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Charlie Betts and I'm a part-time football coach and a PE teacher. As a teacher, I've always been fascinated by the way coaching works in different sports and the impact that can have on me as a football coach. Over the next few weeks, we're going to meet different expert coaches from different parts of the sporting world. We're really going to drill down into their philosophies, values and techniques of their field and find out what makes them so great at their discipline and how it can improve both you and me as coaches and as people. If you like what you hear, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe and comment below on anything that you've drawn from this series that you might want to share with others. Next up is one of the most knowledgeable coaches we will meet in this series. It's ice hockey expert, Coach Dave Smith. Dave is a former pro, having played his career for a variety of teams in the United States of America. Once he hung up his skates, Dave became a coach and has since had a successful career coaching at various colleges and universities across America, and subsequently has been a head coach for the last 15 years. Following a successful spell as head coach of Canisius University in Buffalo, New York, in which the team competed at national level, Dave can now be found plying his trade as head coach of the RPI Engineers in Troy, New York. Dave is very frank and honest about his coaching journey, and it really challenged me about the importance of the relationships with your players. You can find Coach Dave on Twitter at RPI_hockeycoach, and Dave also welcomes emails, and you can email him at smithd25@rpi.edu. And as always, you can find us and our content at Honest Football Free. And now introducing our Coaching Diaries episode with ice hockey head coach, Coach Dave Smith. And I'm pleased to say that Dave Smith is with me now. Dave, first of all, thank you very much for coming on to our podcast. I really appreciate you doing that, especially with the time difference.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So obviously you're on our sort of Coaching Diaries podcast series. So what we're going to do is obviously talk to you about you as a coach, and you have a very impressive and an illustrious coaching career. But before we do that, we sort of, you're one of the few coaches that we've had on who had a background in the actual professional game. So I suppose what I want to ask you is really, where did your journey in ice hockey start from, and sort of tell us a bit more about that, please.
Yeah, it's a great question, and sometimes we have to limit ourselves to short answers here. But I grew up in a really small town in Canada, a town called Arthur, Ontario, and we had about just over 1,000 people in my entire village, and grew up there playing in a backyard rink, playing at the local community center, and just really playing because we loved it. That's what we did in the winter time. Slowly, as I became 15, 16, 17 years old, I played junior hockey. At the time, it was junior B, and I played in a town called Elmira with the Sugar Kings. I played 2 years there. I was a year in Stratford, and then I went on a hockey scholarship to the Ohio State University, where I spent 4 years. From there, I really didn't know what the next steps would be, but I was fortunate enough to make a team in the International Hockey League in a place called Fort Wayne, Indiana, and absolutely loved pro hockey. I played there for a couple of years. I signed a contract with the New York Rangers. Did not play any regular season games in the National Hockey League, but got to play with a lot of guys throughout my career that were National Hockey League players. And then I bounced around the minor leagues, LA, Long Beach, Orlando, San Antonio, Dayton, Binghamton, the life of a pro hockey player trying to crack the National Hockey League lineup. And at that time, we were raising a couple young daughters and had the opportunity to get into coaching, and got in at Miami of Ohio, which is a Division I team in Oxford, Ohio. We played in what was then the CCHA, and was there a couple of years, moved up to Bowling Green, moved over to Mercyhurst University, where we had 2 trips to the NCAA tournament of field of 16. Then I got my first head coaching job at Canisius College in Buffalo, New York, where I spent 12 years and had a trip to the NCAA tournament as well. And then the last 3 years, I've moved over to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which we in the hockey circles know as RPI, where I just finished my 3rd season. So I just wrapped up 50 years into a quick summary, but we can talk as much about those things as you like.
No, that's fantastic. No, I would like to sort of go into it a little bit more before we go on to the sort of coaching part. In terms of that transition from, like you were saying, being a professional player to then coaching, did that feel like a sort of natural thing, or was it a bit more like, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, did you sort of stumble across it, or does that make sense really? You know,
it does. I think there's 2 parts to it. The one part is I had wanted to get into sports. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if that meant coaching or management or working in a front office, but I knew I wanted to be involved in sports. And that piece of it, I had been planning without really any knowledge. I've been writing papers in school and researching different places during my career as a student at Ohio State, and then really just got into pro hockey. As I got farther along in my pro career, I realized that coaching is where I wanted to go. And then that transition is the second phase of the question, which I think when you're around the game so much, it's easy to recognize nuances of the game. It's you see different things. You play 100 games a year. You practice so much. You evaluate and analyze and see different players who have different strengths that you can draw upon. But the game itself was easy. The coaching part was hard because as I stepped into coaching, it didn't dawn on me. I wasn't aware that players had way different motivation levels than I did. I wasn't aware that they didn't see the game as black and white as I did. And to me, when I got into it at first, it was like, well, yeah, this is the way you play. Yeah. And coaching was X's and O's. And now after 23 years, X's and O's are important, but not nearly as important as the relationships and the trust. So I would say at the time, I did not struggle, but now looking back, it was a struggle to learn how to be an effective coach.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So that was sort of going to lead on to the next question, really, which is when you've sort of, you've gone through that playing career, because you had, you've been in the professional game, and obviously initially the players you'd have been coaching haven't had that experience. Do you feel like it was hard to then adjust your expectations in the sense of maybe the quality that you were around, going from a professional standard to then going back to sort of college standard? I know it's not massive difference, but I suppose it is, isn't it, in that sense?
Yeah, it was not a massive difference because we had players going directly from each of our teams into professional hockey. So I had spent a lot of my, really from 16 years old all the way up until I still do this, working youth camps and working with younger players. And that's a passion for a lot of coaches and a passion of mine as well. So it's really easy for me as an individual to embrace the learning and embrace the teaching, because that's the fun part. That's a really fun part, to watch a guy. So even though all of our players weren't at the level of the top pros, every player wanted to get better. Those were the ones. So it was, that part wasn't even a consideration that, man, they're not as good. So we had to find a way. We had to teach them fundamentals. We had to teach them, and they had to teach us. They had to teach us how they saw the game. And that is where a lot of enjoyment came from, is that interaction of trying to help them get to the next level, and then watching them, to watch a young 17-year-old guy by the name of Mike Glumack, who played at Miami, and he's just a big raw talent. Then to watch him play games in the National Hockey League and see him do things that, you know, you had a small hand in helping him. That part was not a challenge because of the joy of teaching.
No, I think that's a fantastic sort of way of articulating it in that sense. But sort of moving on from that, then, when you first went into coaching, like we just sort of mentioned about seeing those players, I know you alluded to it earlier, but what was your sort of philosophy going into coaching in 1998 in Miami, and how would you say that's changed now as obviously the head coach where you are? Because I suppose you've gone through being assistant coaching to then head coach. Does your philosophy change throughout that period, if that makes sense?
It really did. Again, I thought at the beginning, you win with X's and O's. I was that type of player. I didn't think about how hard I had to play or how hard I had to compete. And I just thought everybody did that. I didn't realize the connection that people needed, because I personally didn't feel I needed a connection with the coach as a player. You tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. And so my philosophy right off the bat was, I'll teach you some skills, but this is how you play the game. And if you don't play it that way, it's going to be really difficult. Now, as a head coach, just finished my 15th year as a head coach, it's backwards. Right. It's backwards. And it first starts with the trust and the motivation and the chemistry that we have with each individual, and then the synchronization with the team, with our leadership group. And we now spend a lot of time and resources trying to create the best environment that focuses on the athlete, not on the X's and O's. The X's and O's can come much easier if we have that trust and that relationship. And, you know, we empower our guys. We use a group called Coaching to Connect that we do personality profiles now. So we know, we know that this communication style works with this guy, but not with this guy. Here's what they can expect from us in leadership. So I would say my coaching style and philosophy has improved, but it's flipped probably 180 degrees since 1998.
No, I think I love that. I've sort of spoken to a few coaches, and it seems to be soccer seems to be behind a little bit in the whole holistic sort of way of approaching coaching. And like you were saying, the personality profiles, pretty much every other sport that I've spoken to has some form of that going on, apart from soccer, ironically, where I'm involved in. So it's something that I think football needs to catch up on. But I think you just highlighted how important sort of that is, really. And I suppose that goes beyond just what happens out on the pitch, or not on the pitch, but on the rink, doesn't it? In that sense, it's about they're not just a player; they're a person, aren't they?
Well, they really are people, and it sounds funny when we say it in those terms that we're coaching the person, we're not coaching the soccer player. And when we address it that way, and I've used different language, again, Coaching to Connect. I've been with this group, this company for 8 years, and I've grown as a person. It's almost like a coach for me, where they say, you know, would you feed a vegetarian hamburgers if you knew they were a vegetarian? And the answer is absolutely not. And there's some personalities that need different styles, and it's easy for us to adapt, but first we have to understand. And it's to me, it's critical. And we put our team and our players, and it starts in the recruitment process. We want to know what is their communication style, because if we can communicate, we can solve any problems.
No, I think you've really summed that up sort of beautifully, really. Just sort of moving on then, Dave, just from a coach of your experience, and I'm probably being slightly self-indulgent in this. This is maybe more for me than the listeners, but through your sort of coaching, maybe earlier on, because I suppose as a head coach, we'll sort of go into your role a little bit later on, but maybe in the earlier stages of your coaching, how did you know that you'd sort of been doing some good quality coaching and good work? And what I mean is sometimes I find as a soccer coach, some really messy sort of sessions where things didn't quite flow, or maybe you had a week's training and it didn't quite work out and things like that. But on the game, on the Saturday, there's an outstanding performance. So I suppose what I'm asking is how do you know when you've done like a high quality sort of group of sessions, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think it starts with two things. First, you have to believe in what we're doing as coaches. We have to believe that the plan that we set forth and hand to the guys is something that we believe will make them better. If we believe it, they will believe. They have a better chance to believe it. And I think the second part, which is even more important, is being able to self-evaluate. And that self-evaluation comes from feedback. And for me, that feedback starts with my assistant coaches.
Right.
But equally important is the feedback from our leadership group. So we have a circular hierarchy where it's interchangeable. So the feedback from the first year player, that has a way to get through a mentor, through a leadership pod, through a leadership group to the head coach, and then back down. So we ask for a lot of feedback. We do little meetings, especially earlier in the year. Are you getting out of practice what you need? Do you feel prepared for the games? As a young coach, I didn't do those things. As a young coach, especially as a young head coach, I said, this is the plan, do it or else. And then very quickly realized that, and we call it the meeting after the meeting. So when I would have a meeting with the players, or we'd lay out the strategy in a video session, as soon as I leave the room, there's another conversation. And if that conversation, the meeting after the meeting, isn't supportive of what you did, it's going to be really hard to succeed. So I quickly learned that the leadership group controlled that next meeting, and their buy-in was really important.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've really tried to focus on recently, is that whole buy-in aspect. And I think in sport, sometimes it can still be so easily forgotten, and it almost becomes a dictatorship then, doesn't it? If you're not careful in that sense.
It does. And I think that's probably the most dangerous thing a coach can have is a dictatorship mentality, because guys will play, but guys won't excel.
No.
Guys will play because they love the game. But, and we've seen this transformation here in my time at RPI. I mean, we when I got here with our staff, we couldn't believe the facilities are excellent, and everything was in front of them, but they would come to the rink, practice, and leave. And it was very awkward. And I would ask them, like, why aren't you utilizing the skill development area? Why aren't you, hanging out with your buddies in the players lounge? And the answer was, it's no fun.
Right.
So I said, well, how do we incorporate fun? And they said, well, why are we doing these things? So once they understood why, we shared the common goal of improvement daily. Now they started to hang around a little bit more. Now their day was filled with, let's go shoot some pucks in our skill development area. Let's do some individual work on our own, because they understood the why. They appreciated each other because of the personality evaluations. And now all of a sudden our program, that's the environment and the culture that is the norm.
Yeah, no, I think the why question is I'm glad you've highlighted that, because it's something that I think I've only picked up sort of recently, but actually it underpins everything. If you don't know why you're doing it, or if you do but the players don't, it's just as sort of, it's so self-defeating then, isn't it? Like you say, I suppose it is.
And we really put our athletes front and center.
Mm.
But they don't know that. They
No.
don't feel that unless you really express that to them. And today's athlete is different. It's changed in the last 20 years, and they want to know why. And if you don't have your why, if you don't have your theme for the practice, if you just throw a warm-up drill in there because you want to kill time, it's really poorly executed by the players. And is once they know why, now you can raise the standard, and now they take ownership. And us as coaches, and this is my preferred strategy, once we get to that point, I'm a passenger. And I just have two fingers on the wheel, and I just, all right, hey, let's do this a little bit more. Let's do this a little bit more. And now the team drives itself.
Yeah, I think it creates autonomy then, doesn't it? Like you say, then the players are not, I've always likened it to when I'm coaching sometimes, that if I wanted to do everything and be on top of all of it, I'd go home and play it on the computer or something like that. You don't go into coaching to control every aspect, do you? I suppose in that sense.
Right. And the coaches, I mean, we call it, when we self-evaluate ourselves, we have a tendency to what we call joystick the players, where we think we've got this, computer generated. And we're like, move it, kick it, shoot it.
Yeah.
And we're like, just be quiet and watch them play is a way better strategy for us as coaches.
That's the best way of it. That's the sort of best analogy I've heard of that. I think, I really, I love that. I'll take that into my own sort of, spiel from now on. But I think it's, that joystick mentality. I think soccer particularly here, because to be honest, to go through your qualifications as a soccer coach is so expensive in England that actually you have a lot of people in positions in football clubs that maybe aren't quite, I'm not saying that the qualifications are everything, but haven't got the experience, or I suppose they're in over their head, and it becomes that default position then is to be, like you say, that joystick sort of mentality really, which is a bit of a shame. But I do admire that, particularly in sort of, I've spoken to a few coaches from North America now, and actually that, and the way of taking a step back and just letting the players play is something that I think is done a lot better in North America than what it is over here.
I think it's a real challenge. For one, we have over 3,000 people a game.
Yes.
At our college games. And in the NHL, you've got 10, 15, 20,000 people at a game. And those people that pay their money want to see us coaching. And that's no different than the youth hockey parent or the youth soccer parent that wants to see you coaching. And they don't really know what coaching is. And the coach sometimes doesn't know what it is. So he says, I have to do things. I have to yell. I have to move. I have to tell him every second what to do. And I think that environment creates a negative environment. And you see those coaches reach a ceiling. Yes. And I think the coaches that climb to the highest level of their sport are often the ones confident enough to know that they coach in practice, they manage in games, and they let the players play.
No, I think that's completely correct. I've recently had written an article for a magazine about that kind of thing, about just sometimes, especially earlier on in my sort of coaching career, I felt like I was on show, and sometimes you're almost coaching the parents as much as you are the players. You feel like you have to sort of demonstrate stuff to them. So I think you're sort of bang on. Just to move on, sort of, Dave, on to the next part then. And again, I'm just sort of picking your brains more for my development as well as the people listening. In terms of negativity from players, and I know that happens. There's no, I think as coaches sometimes we like to be naive enough to think maybe it doesn't happen, but it does. How do you sort of handle maybe negativity? And what I mean by that is maybe a player who isn't quite putting enough into practice, or not necessarily refusing to do their job, but just isn't quite making the sort of right attitude towards their work, really, I suppose. How do you sort of cope with that, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we've tried different things over the years, and my two daughters are both athletes. They're now 23 and 21, and
right.
My 21-year-old, I had a hand in coaching her through very competitive fast pitch softball all the way up.
Right.
My older daughter, she played hockey. and played Division III college hockey at Manhattanville, and has since graduated.
Right.
And my role in coaching them, I coached them the exact same way I coached my college men.
Right.
But more importantly, I coached my college men the same way I coached the youth softball and the youth hockey teams. And when the effort wasn't there, for one, you talk to them, make sure that everything's okay, make sure they understand what the standard of effort is. And sometimes you have to discipline them. And I remember the first time I did this with my college hockey team. Somebody's effort wasn't there in practice, and I gave them a timeout.
Right. Okay.
I gave them a timeout, and I said, "Hey, just go sit on the bench for a little bit." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're in timeout." And if it was a real egregious lack of effort, I just had said, "Go take your timeout in the penalty box," because the penalty box in hockey is a place that, according to the movie Slapshot, is a place you go and feel shame.
Right.
So I wasn't trying to embarrass them, but you don't have to do that too many times till the guys realize that you have a standard of effort. And it's no different whether it was my daughter's 8-year-old softball team or a 23-year-old man in a hockey team, that if you're consistent with your standard and you bring attitude and effort in a positive way every day, then you'll get good results, and people will feel good.
No, I really appreciate you being so honest about that. Thank you for that. That's, I've learned a lot from that myself. So I just need to maybe get a penalty box in my sort of soccer practice. But yeah, just sort of moving on to your role as a head coach, because it's something that fascinates me really, because in, soccer, we have a slightly different structure, but I had a very short stint at being like what would be the equivalent of a head coach. And I struggled with it. I didn't really excel in it at all and didn't quite feel like my skill set was best used. So I've since gone back to being what you guys would call like an assistant coach. From like a day-to-day sort of basis, what is your role as a head coach, in the sense of how much time are you actually on, out there practicing with the players, or do you take a bit more of a step back and let your assistant coaches do a lot of the bulk of that and observe more, if that makes sense?
Yeah, another great question. And that's changed over the years. When I first got my head coaching opportunity with Canisius in Buffalo, we had no full-time assistant, and we only had a graduate assistant coach. And so I brought on a full-time assistant, and the graduate assistant turned over every year, a different guy every year. And my involvement at that time with an emerging program was very different than it is now at an established program. But the goal never changed at either place. So, my goal as the head coach is first and foremost to empower my assistant coaches so that they can have ownership. So the communication, and for one, the trust with the assistant coaches is critical, because if I don't trust them to manage one portion of our game, then I'm going to be inserting myself into every conversation, and the players are going to know that I don't trust the assistant coach. So my first goal with my assistant coaches is to empower them to really run all aspects of the program as we decide together. So, that means weekly meetings. We have a Monday morning meeting. We meet every single day. We plan practice. Who's going to do what. We have a recap meeting at the end of the week. Obviously, we review film together. But my first goal is to empower them. My second goal with as the head coach is to make sure that I'm staying connected with the people. So if the points we talked about earlier, if culture and the people, if we're going to put our athletes first, I can't be a taskmaster as the head coach where this is the power play and this is what time we start practice and this is what we're going to do at this moment. So I actually let my assistant coaches manage the practice, and we call it the big whistle. So I can look over the whole ice surface. I can stand in the line and talk to the guys. And yes, I have the ability as the head coach to insert myself anywhere, but I've got such good assistants. Chuck Weber, who actually coached in, I think he coached in Coventry at one time.
All right. Yes. Yeah.
And Scott Mosier, who is a former player of mine. I totally trust those guys, but my role as the head coach comes with some perceived power. So what I try to do in practice is, use my whistle when I need to, use my voice when I need to, but one, I empower the staff. Two, I stay connected with people. Now, as I'm doing those things, I have different media obligations than the assistant coaches. So my role to grow the program needs those first two things in line, so that, right after practice, some days I'm going and I'm doing media for an hour, or I'm going and doing, whatever it is I'm doing. And then the last thing that I think is really important that I've added the last couple of years that allows me as a head coach is to win every opportunity. And what that means is I need to fly from 30,000 feet and look down and watch the interaction between an assistant coach and one player. And to win that opportunity, I need to say to him, I saw what you did there. That was really good. Or I saw what you did there, and have you considered trying it this way? And the only way I can do that is to have my feet on the ground and have my eyes at 30,000 feet, so I can win those opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think you're probably underselling the fact of how hard it is probably to do that, isn't it? To be able to, be involved, but also not involved. And I think that was something that I found difficult personally, was the ability to remove yourself, and a bit of a control freak, I suppose. And like you say, it's empowering your staff enough that you completely trust them to do what you expect them to do, almost, isn't it?
Yeah, and I have found that it's really challenging if you don't have the either the experience level on the staff or the trust level with your staff. That's when the control freak in me comes out.
Right.
Where I need to see this done differently. And rather than coach the coach, I'm going to coach the situation. And I think that's very negative type coaching. I should be coaching the coach and coaching the staff and coaching the player, not coaching the situation.
No, again, I really appreciate you being so honest about that, Dave. It's incredibly honest of you. So thank you so much for that. There's only a few more questions. I don't want to take up, loads of your afternoon, or your morning, my afternoon, sorry. But just in terms of the difference between the sports of, soccer and ice hockey, just on a normal week, because I know obviously in ice hockey play a tremendous amount of games. What does the week look like in terms of the training? And I know you were saying about the practices. I know you were saying about the assistant coaches and things like that. But what I mean is how much is maybe individual work? How much is then sort of team-based work? And, what would be the breakdown of that across the week, really, I suppose?
Yeah. And so with us being at a university level, we have the added element of school.
Yes.
So our guys need to go to class. They need to do well in class. And RPI is an elite institution that demands our guys pay attention. They can't just show up to class and achieve. So we always have to pay attention to that. But we recruit hockey players that value education. We don't recruit students that can play hockey. Right. So our hockey players that value education, that comes easier. So now we can start to focus on the hockey plan, which is the question. So our Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday mornings are dedicated to skill development when they are not in class. Right. So typically that's 30 minutes a day in small groups of 3 to 6 people. And we go on the ice, and the coaches, we know our routine. We have a schedule. We drop everything, especially the assistant coaches. We drop everything. If a player comes and says, I want to practice skill development, and we'll go on the ice and work with them. So that's individual work, small group sessions, minimum 30 minutes a week, but we have 3 days to do that, and they can do more. Our afternoons, we also have some skill development, but that's drop-in. That's not planned and organized. That's drop-in skill development. And that starts anywhere around 1 to 1:30 in the afternoon, depending on their class schedule. Our team practice, we go for 60 minutes, as close to 60 minutes as we can. Early in the week, it might be 75. Later in the week, it might be 45 minutes, but that's high intensity, high pace, team oriented practice. After that session is done, it's open ice where they can do anything they want.
Right.
Every 3 days a week, early in the morning at 7 a.m., our guys are in the weight room, lifting, stretching, rolling out, soft tissue management, as well as strength and development there. So that's 3 days a week. And then Sunday is a day of rest.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They need it.
I can imagine, yeah, because the demands on your body in any, any sport at the elite level where you're involved is going to be hard, isn't it, on your body? But I imagine ice hockey more than most sports, the demands on your body, because it's such a fast-paced game, and the physical demands of that, you need that day of rest, don't you?
It really is a physically demanding game. And, the other piece that I didn't touch on there is the video work. I mean, we have a full-time video guy who we cut and I think this term comes from soccer, but we cut every touch. So every time a guy touches it, or time a guy's involved in the play, every time he's on the ice, our guys have that ability. So we have one-on-one meetings, we have positional meetings, and then we have team meetings. And our goal on those is not long, drawn-out conversations. It's what do they need to know, because time is really critical.
Yeah.
What do they need to know? How do we deliver it to them based on personality? And what do they bring to the table in terms of questions? What do they want to know? So it is a full week. And what you find is that once the guys come in August, next thing you know, it's May.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it just flies by.
No, do you know what? I think one thing that I've learned there that I think is fascinating actually is the whole drop in, almost putting a bit of onus on the player, isn't it, as well? To make, I know you're there to provide them the quality of coaching, but I suppose half the battle is them going there, isn't it? And I think that's an incredible sort of thing that I've never thought of, actually, that sort of way of doing it almost.
We do that in two ways. We do it on the ice for drop in for skill development. So they actually pick the topic, and we have to, a player might come and say, I want to work on this specific skill. And we have to quickly dig into our mental library and pull out a skill and say, okay, let's do it. So it's about questions. So he'd say, I want to work on this skill. And I say, all right, well, where in the game do you use it? Where on the ice do you use it? Okay, let's go put yourself in a game situation. The other area that we do is once a month, and this has been really successful. We do a mandatory drop-in meeting, but players hate meetings.
Yes.
Players hate those. So we just call it a 2-minute meeting.
Right.
And so this week I meet with every player for 2 minutes, but they run the meeting. So they run the meeting, and it's their topics and it's their questions, and so they could ask me anything. They can say, where did I go for a run with my dog yesterday? Or, why am I not playing more? Or, what happened? How come I didn't play down the stretch of this game? They can ask anything. And those drop-ins are also very, very beneficial. And once again, it gives that player the platform to ask the most personal questions about them specifically, because we are so driven on team and then individual skills. Sometimes we don't know what their real questions are. So that's been something that's been really good.
No, I think I've really learned loads from that. I think that's a fascinating way of approaching, actually, rather than the sort of, I suppose, depending on which sport you're in, but sometimes you can be conditioned to just sort of my way or the highway, can't you, almost? And actually that approach of giving them the responsibility, I think, is fantastic. Just a couple more questions. The last few are quick fire, but I'll just go on to the last one, because this is quite specific to you and your sort of role. So I'm actually a school teacher as well as a football coach, and I've coached sort of youth teams at a high level, in the sense of having players who are excellent footballers but have maybe been expelled. We'd call it expelled from school, but kicked out of school, basically. But there's been no sort of information given to me as the coach or anything like that. So the player continues to be involved and play. And I suppose for me, I find that my sport, football or soccer, is so about the football, and that's it. And one thing I've always admired about sort of North America in terms of their approach to sport is the relationship with the education. But from your role, how much, I suppose, input do you have about their education? Do you have to not do their homework with them, obviously not like that, but do you know what I mean? How does that relationship work with you maybe having an outstanding player, but who's not necessarily doing what they should be in school almost, or something like that, if that makes sense?
It's so the NCAA, they have a minimum standard that every student athlete has to attain. And there's a wide variety of not only academic intelligence, but academic effort. I can't do much about their academic intelligence, but I can be involved in their effort. So I take the perspective that just like I did with my own children, I learned more from my own children than anywhere else, but, is I talk to them. I set a standard. So for me, we do at the university level here, they know that school is important. They have to value education. So we ask them to sit in the first 3 rows of their classroom. Don't wear a hat when they're in the classroom. Stay off their phone. Go to class and know their professor. Now, we do random attendance checks. So maybe twice a semester, we'll just walk around to their classroom. And what I have found, and my wife is a philosophy professor, and she's shared her thoughts and ideas on the academics as well. But if they do those 5 things, their academic intelligence appears to go higher.
Right.
So they put in the effort. We tell them how to effort by sitting in the first 3 rows, stay off the phone, take your hat off. So now they're a respectful student up near the front of the class. And what we have found is that pressure to do the right thing helps them achieve at a significantly higher level. If they don't sit at the front of the class and they get caught, our entire team does what we call breakfast club.
Right.
And so if one player is wearing his hat in class, our whole team goes and we sweep the bleachers at 6:30 in the morning. So it's a progressive discipline that it's like, okay, boys, just do the right thing. Just go to class, do the right thing. And if it becomes a problem, then I remove that person from punishing the whole team.
Yeah.
But the pressure from the team keeps these guys doing the right thing most of the time.
I think that's fantastic because I never thought of that. You try and convince a player of whatever sport to be, try your best in school, but actually to have those 5 particular sort of standards to attain to, I think that's, I wish I'd known that before, but it's a fantastic way of looking at it, really, I think. So yeah, I really appreciate, again, you being so honest, Dave. So we've got 3 questions that we ask every coach just to finish off with, just a quick fire one. And so we try and get the negative one out of the way, which is, what do you enjoy least about coaching? And that could have been from when you started in 1998, or could have been, 2 months ago, whatever it is, if that makes sense. What's the thing you enjoy the least?
What do I enjoy least about coaching? Well, I really don't like the late night bus trips.
Right, of course.
Where you have to come back and you can't sleep, and you're always worried about the safety of the entire bus, and is the driver really awake, and why is it so windy, and is the road slippery, and you're trying to sleep and watch video, and to me that's the worst part of of coaching.
I suppose the level that you're coaching at as well, the distances you cover are just huge. I think we think that places in England are quite far away, and then you go to North America and you realize actually how vast it is in the areas you have to cover in that sense. But yeah,
we have some, where we're located in our league, in my current situation, our farthest trip is 4 hours in our league. And we go the day before the game, but when you leave, you play a 7 o'clock at night game, you get on the road at 10 o'clock. If you're not home till 2, that's still a later night. And I've played in, my previous spot, our farthest trip was 8 hours. Yeah. So, you leave at 10 o'clock, you're back at 6 in the morning. And, on the real far trips, and 8 hours is not a real far trip here, but on the real far ones, we'll fly. and
Yeah.
and we always go the day before a game, but it's that late night trip home that that can get you.
That's incredible. That really is. I mean, 4 hours from here would take me to a different country. But anyway, that's that's one of those things. So that's a negative one anyway. So the second to last question is, what is the most rewarding part of coaching? I know there must be, especially some of your experience, you must have loads of aspects of coaching that you find rewarding. But if you had to just say one and sort of nail it to one sort of thing, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that one's easy for me, and that's seeing a young man the first time as a recruit, remembering that vision of what he is and was and how that conversation went, and then watching him grow and develop over however many years it is, and then becoming what he dreamed about being. And so we recently had a guy named Will Riley, who was a senior on our team this past year. He signed a contract with the Pittsburgh Penguins,
Right.
and in the National Hockey League. And right at the end of the year, we sit down with our players and we show them what their goals were when they were a first year, when they were a second year, when they were a third year. And it's amazing that they often reach their goals.
Right.
And very rarely do people go back, and this is what coaching is we say, hey, I want you to set this goal. And then we check in on it and say, hey, how are you doing towards that goal? But then when they're finished, we look back and say, look at what you did.
Yeah.
You wanted to sign an NHL contract. You wanted to be an all league player, and you so that's the goal. That's an outcome goal. So those outcome goals are really important, but us as coaches, our job is to put the process in place so that they can reach their outcome. And that's the most rewarding piece, is when they reach their outcome, you remind them of how much work they put in, and you've seen them grow and develop.
That's amazing. I think that it's a measurable goal, then, isn't it, as well? You can go back to it and stuff.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean they're going to attain it.
No.
But it's something that they're working towards. And to me, that creates a real positive vibe.
I think that's incredible. And so the last question, and actually of the sort of coaches I've spoken to before, this is always the one that they find probably the hardest to answer, which is, how would a player describe you as a coach? So if you was to get one of your players, whether it be now or, ones you've coached before, if you was to ask them to describe you as a coach, what do you think they would say?
I think they would say, and I know this because we asked.
Oh, brilliant!
Guys,
okay.
But they say I'm very fair,
right.
Very demanding, and want the best for them, and need to continue to work at expressing that.
I think that's fascinating, and actually, you're the first one to be able to answer that straight off the bat. So that's probably something that I should do as well, is ask my sort of players that, because I think a lot of coaches probably don't always know what their players think of them, which is. I suppose you're leaving yourself vulnerable then, aren't you, to maybe some answers you don't want to hear. I don't know, but it's...
Well, just like the meeting after the meeting, that what I recited to you is what they tell me. I don't know what they talk about when I'm not there.
No, very good. Dave, it just leads me to say thank you so much for giving up your time to do this. Just really quickly, I'll put this in like the show notes, but if anyone wanted to sort of get in contact with you or keep up to date with what you are doing and your college program and that, where could they sort of find you, whether it be people who are, from a hockey background or from ice hockey background or from a soccer background, where would they be able to sort of keep?
So our school website is www.rpi.edu, and I'll give you my email. It's smithd25@rpi.edu, smithd25@rpi.edu. And I enjoy doing things like this, and always encourage positive questions and positive feedback from anybody that maybe this triggered some thoughts or notions that they were wondering about, or just to validate, or just to say hello.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Actually, that's very kind of you to give out your email address as well. So that's amazing of you. So yeah, just thank you so much, and obviously all the best for the rest of the season.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. Well prepared, great questions, and I'm a sports junkie, and to be able to cross-reference topics like this is often very enjoyable.